A western where Glenn Ford fights off cattle ranchers with a flock of sheep. A western where Jane Fonda hires a drunk gunfighter who can only shoot when he's wasted. A western that's also a musical. These movies are ridiculous, but they work. This one's a perfect example of how westerns and comedy can mix seamlessly. Glenn Ford plays a gambler, Jason Sweet, who wins a poker game and walks away with a flock of sheep. That's his prize. So, naturally, he decides to move his sheep into a cattle town, which goes exactly as well as you'd expect. The local ranchers aren't happy, tensions rise, and Sweet finds himself in the middle of a ridiculous standoff. Now, the premise sounds kind of goofy, but that's exactly what makes it work. It's got all the classic western elements, tough cowboys, duels, high stakes, but with a comedic twist. And the cast, Glenn Ford, Shirley MacLaine, and Leslie Nielsen. So yeah, you know it's going to be fun. This one's a full-blown western comedy. It's not just poking fun at western tropes, it's celebrating them. James Garner plays Jason McCullough, a drifter who ends up becoming sheriff of a lawless town. He's not really interested in law enforcement, but he is interested in the gold rush, so he figures, why not take the job? The town's overrun by the Danby family, who are loud, obnoxious, and causing all kinds of trouble. McCullough's job? Get them in line, and he does it in the most unconventional, hilariously laid-back way possible. The movie never takes itself too seriously, but it still delivers on everything people love about westerns. If you like your westerns with a side of high-stakes gambling, Maverick is the one. Mel Gibson plays Brett Maverick Jr., a smooth-talking conman trying to hustle his way into a poker tournament where the prize is huge. And along the way, he runs into Jodie Foster, James Garner, and a bunch of legendary western actors making surprise cameo appearances. This movie is basically a love letter to the western genre. It's packed with references, it's got a twisty, unpredictable story, and best of all, it's just fun. It never leans too hard into action or violence. Instead, it focuses on the charm, the humor, and the classic western adventure. This one takes a classic western setup and flips it into a comedy. Jane Fonda plays Cat Ballou, a woman trying to protect her father's ranch. And to do that, she hires a legendary gunfighter. Only problem, the guy she hires, played by Lee Marvin, is a complete disaster. A washed-up drunk who can't even shoot straight unless he's hammered. It's got its tense moments, sure, but the humor is what makes it stand out. It was a massive hit when it came out, even scoring 5 Oscar nominations. And Lee Marvin won Best Actor for playing 2 different roles in the movie. It's one of those films that's just as fun for comedy fans as it is for western fans. A sci-fi western might sound like a weird combination, but Back to the Future Part 3 pulls it off perfectly. This time, Marty McFly and Doc Brown end up in the 1880s, smack in the middle of the Wild West. And what do they have to do? Survive frontier life and find a way back to their own time. The first 2, Back to the Future movies, weren't westerns at all, of course, but Part 3 fully commits to the genre. Cowboys, saloons, duels at high noon, it's all there. But it still keeps that same fun, adventurous feel the series is known for. It's lighthearted, it's exciting, and it proves that westerns don't have to be all about shootouts and revenge. If there's one western that proves animation can do anything, it's Rango. Directed by Gore Verbinski, yeah, the Pirates of the Caribbean guy, this one takes all the classic western tropes and throws them into an animated world that looks insane. The story follows a pampered pet chameleon who winds up in a desert town called Dirt and somehow becomes the sheriff. It's got outlaws, duels, saloon brawls, everything you'd expect from a western, just done in a way you've never seen before. Johnny Depp leads a ridiculous voice cast, the visuals are stunning, and this thing even won an Oscar. People might not think of animation when they think of westerns, but Rango doesn't just belong in the genre, it straight up celebrates it. A western and a musical. If that sounds weird, welcome to Calamity Jane. Doris Day plays the legendary frontierswoman, and the whole thing is big, loud, and about as far from a gritty western as you can get. The plot is simple. Jane heads to Chicago to recruit a famous singer for her saloon, but she accidentally hires the wrong person. It's completely ridiculous, but it works. The songs are catchy. The comedy actually lands, and Doris Day carries the whole thing effortlessly. Westerns have always been a man's genre, but this is one of the films that flipped that on its head. James Stewart isn't the first name people think of when they think of westerns, but the guy made a ton of them, and this was the one that started it all. Destry Rides Again pairs him up with Marlene Dietrich in a western that asks a simple question: does a hero really need a gun to win? Stewart plays Tom Destry Jr., a lawman who doesn't believe in violence, which makes him a bit of a joke to the rough and tumble folks in town. But over the course of the film, he proves that you don't need to shoot first to be the hero. It's a lighter western, one that leans more on charm and character than shootouts and bloodshed. Critics loved it too. The film's in the National Film Registry now, and it's still one of the best examples of how westerns can do more than just glorify gunslingers. Mel Brooks goes all in on spoofing every western trope imaginable, but at the same time, he actually tells a pretty solid western story underneath all the insanity. A new sheriff comes to town, but the people he's supposed to be protecting are incredibly racist and don't want him there. Meanwhile, a corrupt politician is scheming to run them all out and take over the land. Cleavon Little and Gene Wilder are perfect in this. And yeah, there are shootouts, but they're played for laughs more than anything else. This movie was wildly controversial when it came out, and let's be honest, it could never be made today. But it's still one of the most iconic Western comedies ever made. Rio Bravo is probably the most traditional Western on this list, but it still fits the bill as a feel-good movie. Directed by Howard Hawks and starring John Wayne and Dean Martin, this is the ultimate underdog Western. The story kicks off when Wayne's sheriff arrests a killer, but the guy's brother isn't about to let him stay locked up, so he rounds up a posse to break him out. That leaves Wayne to put together his own group of misfits to hold the jail against impossible odds. It's a simple setup, but what makes Rio Bravo work is the chemistry between the cast. Wayne, Martin, Ricky Nelson, everyone just clicks. And even though there's tension, the movie never feels too heavy. It's fun, it's entertaining, and it ends on a high note, which is exactly what you want from a feel-good Western. Critics still love it too. This thing has a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes.